tailplane is actually huge. It's really huge. It's also wafer thin and I can easily flex it, so we're going to have to be very careful with that. The top wing, each wing side is made up of 3 parts. I've cleaned all these up now. Takes a little bit of time because you've got to go all the way around and remove the seam. Unfortunately, there was one section just here where the sprue gate connected where there's a rib. So we've lost a little bit of a rib, which is a bit annoying. Why they didn't put it in between, I don't know. But anyway, they seem to have done that everywhere else, like there, for example. Anyway, so I'm just going to build this wing half up, and we'll see how that goes. Now, this first bit that we're going to put in goes in the underside of the wing there, and you can see got a little groove that lines up with this here. So you can just plop that in. The important thing then is just making it nice and aligned on here, so it's getting it straight with that bit. So that's what I'm going to do first. I'm just going to hold it in place so it's nice and aligned, and we'll glue that edge in first. Will be a little bit of tidy up needed afterwards, just to make the joints disappear a little bit. Keeping my fingers away, I don't want to get any gluey fingerprints on this one. Well, try not to do it on any of them, but this one's a bit of a special build one way or another. So there we go, and then we can run some glue into the joint. That's all looking good, and then now I'm not clamping this because sometimes clamping can put too much pressure on, and because this is the quick setting glue, quite happy to just hold it for a moment and make sure that it grabs the way I want. So it's always worth having a look at clamping like as a dry fitting process first, because sometimes it can put too much pressure on and deform your shape. So that's all in now. We're just going to run some glue down this join line here, and it's just making sure that, because it's quite a big surface and we've not put glue on the inside surface, which you imagine we might have done, and you certainly could do if you wanted. It's just going to make sure that we've flooded as much glue to capillary in as possible. There you go. So that's in place. You can see there's a little bit of a witness, so there's a little bit of gentle sanding to do and a hairline crack to fill, but that's that bit in. Now this, obviously the aerial on, it has a really interesting shape. Look at that. Which in the instructions it says note washout, but I'm not quite sure what that means. Well, when I say I'm not quite sure, I have no idea what it means. So I don't know whether that should be aligned like that or what, but I'm going to assume that this edge should be aligned with the wing. So you can see that the fit is lovely. It just holds in place based on the fact that it's such a nice tight fit. So with that in place, I can simply go in and glue it at the connection points, which is basically the hinges. So it will be delicate, but it's going to look nice and authentic. I don't believe the part is touching anywhere else, but just around the hinges I'm putting a little bit of glue, and that all looks nice and authentic. So as long as we're careful with the wings, we should be okay. And that is our wing done. Now, whilst the glue is still wet, I'm just going to make sure that everything's nicely aligned. There we go. Now obviously we all see the wing mainly from the top, so that's the edge that needs to be right. There we go, that looks lovely. So I can put that to one side to dry and just rest it, and job's good. Only not quite got the angle right there. Seems to be that if you get the angle right at one point, it looks slightly out at the other point. And what we could do to help it is put a little bit of masking tape there to stop it moving. There we go. That'll keep that in place now while that's just drying. I might, because we've moved it around a little bit, I might just belt and braces, but I want this as strong as possible. There we go. Right, we'll let that dry. Now the process with the wing will be to paint it, and then when it's all painted we'll gently drill out any location points for the turnbuckles. It's a beautiful shaped wing, and that's just one half. Okay, I have also just built up the tailplane, so it's all very thin. It's stronger than it looks, but it is actually a little fragile, and until we get the bracing spars on, it will remain quite fragile. But actually, I don't want to put the bracing spars on at this moment in time because I want to make sure that it's all painted first. So with the exception of these rudder panels, which are white, everything else gets painted the same colour, but all the spars are this very pale, almost white grey that we're using. So quite a bit of painting to do, and then we've got some decals to go on before we can add the spars and the bracing wires and bits and pieces. So it's quite a flimsy little construction, but it's done, and that's ready to be attached to the plane. In fact, we could test fit it to the fuselage, couldn't we? This will be interesting. I've not test fitted it before, so we're going to do this together. There's a little notch in the end there, which that sits into, and then a couple of little location points there on either side, as we would expect from Wingnut Wings, quite tight. It's not going to hold in place without some glue, but that gives you an idea of the back end. And then this rigging attaches to these little points here, I think, or it might be the one that comes out of there maybe. Yeah, I think the rigging that comes out of there attaches to there. Anyway, it's gonna look cool. However you look at it, it's gonna be very cool.
They are from Trumpeter, and quite good. And I've got a razor saw which would have done the same thing. But I found the little ones from Trumpeter with little plastic handles you put on. It's not much easier because you actually got it all close to you all the time, and you haven't got a handle to move back and forward.
Okay, time to put some decals on. What I have done is I've varnished the areas where we're going to put decals on, just put a gloss coat down, so anything that's white, where these next set of decals are going, has been prepped, ready for the decals. And then when the decals are on, we can clear coat it, and then I'm feeling more comfortable that all this paint is okay. Do have a little bit of touch up. Unfortunately, lost a little bit of paint when we took some of the masking tape off, just a tiny amount. It's minor stuff. So let's get on with the decals. I'm going to do the tail first, and I've actually I'd like to say that I took that off on deliberately, but it came off when I was unmasking it, and my takeaway is the pins, because it's so narrow, the pins are so small, there's just no strength in this part at all. Whilst this one has managed to stay on, that one hasn't. So we'll a little bit of CA, we'll put that back into place. It'll be stronger when it's got the support struts and rigging and stuff on anyway. So it makes it handy for you guys though, because that means that I can put my first decals on here and you can see it, which is going to be a little bit easier, isn't it? So there's two decals, one on each side. These are Balkan crosses. You do have to be a little bit careful of them. They have put on their front because there's if you look closely, there's a little edge just cut off there, and that's going to be on that bottom edge there. So it's also going to help you position it correctly. But basically, the cross at the this bottom point here is going to be in contact with the back edge there. So it's a great way of locating it. So I'm going to cut my first one out. And we'll take the other side one out as well. Okay, so we're going to do, if we do this side first, we need to put that one in first. Okay, now when I'm putting decals on that have been made by Cartograph, then I tend not to put setting solution down first. Reason being is they're quite delicate and they can rip, and as soon as they hit that softener, they're getting even more delicate. So from Tamiya decals, absolutely, but not Cartograph. So don't blindly follow rules, apply them where it's appropriate. Is, you know, think about what you're doing is what I'm saying. Okay. The paper is actually quite thick, so they take a little bit of soak before we can do anything with them, and these are quite chunky, so I can use my big chunky tweezers. Let's get some blotting paper ready. Right, this is ready to go. So I'm just going to position it on this end here, because that's the end we're going to be using to align this. Okay. That's nearly there, I think. That appears to be about right. I'm just gently pushing the air out, making sure that it's lying flat. Yeah. And then I'm going to blot it. There we go. Now then, go back and push the air out. I can see where air is trapped. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over it with a paintbrush that's been dipped in Microsol. And we're just going to use that to apply a bit more pressure, like a squeegee, take out any trapped air, always working from the centre out for obvious reasons. There we go, that is our first decal on. So I want that one to dry before I do that other side. So I'm going to do the other tail off camera, and then we'll come back to do that other side in a minute. Okay, I've got the Balkan crosses on, but there's a couple of other decals that go on just around these hinges, and we have these quite strange brown ones. You can see there's lots of them go in various places, so I'm not quite sure what they represent. It's almost like something's been painted on around the around anything that moves a hinge or even a connection point. So not really sure. But we have one that goes around each hinge, and it sort of overlaps both the green and the white area. So we're going to start with the top one. They only go on the outside. They're not going on the inside face, just the outside. And then we have one that goes on the bottom that's a bit more complicated. So that is... So you can probably not see, if I bring this up, just above this hinge there's a tiny hole, and there is a hole in the decal, so that should be nice and easy to line up. Now then, let's get them soaked and then we can have a go. Right, I'm hoping... Now, I just said that they're only on the outside face. That's wrong, I was reading the instructions incorrectly. They do go on both sides, so... So this one goes around the top. And believe it or not, there is no decal film on the area that goes over the hinge. That is really nice. So I'm not cutting anything out or anything like that. Just give it a little brush of Microsol, help it set in that recess a little bit. There we go, that's the first one on. So the one below that is the one with a hole. Not quite ready. Trouble is, when you've got magnifying glasses on, your peripheral vision comes down. So I'll keep bumping that. I'm just going to move it a little bit. They do seem to take a long time to soak off, these decals. Okay, you get the idea. I'm going to crack on with this and I'll come back to you when we've got the tail done and we're moving on to the wings. Okay, we're going to have a look at the upper wing for the decals now. It's slightly different to the lower wings. You'll notice that we've got a small area. That's not because we've got a smaller cross, it's because it's cut off, as you can see here in the instructions. So on the UWD, they've replaced that item, so it's different to the standard Gotha. It's got this little bit on here. It's almost like they've replaced it after it's been painted. So whether that was in trials or whatever, I don't know, but you end up with a cut off Balkan cross, which is quite an interesting look, I think. So we're going to start by that. Now these are pretty big decals that we're now dealing with here. So it's 7 and 1 that we want. 7 is going to be the underside one, I think. Yeah. So I'm going to cut out 7 to start with. I'm not quite sure what these dotted lines are. So we've got these, I'll show you, I'll get you up close and you can have a look. You see this dotted line? That's a separate decal, so I don't know if it's related to that or not. It doesn't have a number, but they've also got them there. So I think it's trying to show you where the location of the wing curve is or something like that. So I don't think that's supposed to go with it, so I'm clipping it off, because I don't want that in my water. Unfortunately, they've put stuff in between the crosses, which means you've got to cut the paper. I would have preferred that to have been a solid square, make it easier for sliding. This is much more likely to have issues now when we try and take it off, but anyway, it is what it is. So that is gonna go, oh, this must be the underneath one then, because that hole is not aligned to that. Let's have a look. It's a good job I'm checking, isn't it? Oh yeah, it is the underneath one. I took that one off first. Right, so that hole aligns with that hole. Okay, got it. We'll put the top one on first. So that's decal number 1. Okay. Now this decal sheet got a bit of damage, but it seems to have avoided the decal. It came like that. It's the parts pressing on it, because in the box the decals were faced up, and really you want them face down. So let's put that in and get that soaking. And what we're going to do is hopefully position it fairly correctly first time. Right, we are ready to go with this decal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dampen my finger and I'm just going to put some water down where we're placing it. So if we put microset down, it's going to soften the decal. If we put water down, decal's going to float, and that's going to help me position it. So I'm going to put my magnifying glasses on. And just see what I mean about having to cut the backing paper. It's causing all sorts of problems. There we go, found the pin. Right. Right, okay. Now, I'm noticing something that was not obvious before. I'll talk you through it in a sec. So there's a little hole in the decal which goes over a raised pin, and you can see that the decal is overhanging, and that's because what they've actually provided is some decal to go on the inside of this hinge. So really that decal wants to go on before this part here. They don't give you the decal instructions till the paint instructions. There's no mention of it in the instructions to do it that way, but it's clear. So when this is dried, I'm going to have to trim that off. But we are essentially in the right place there, even though it perhaps doesn't look it. So there we go. I'm just going to block that now. And then same as before, microsalt on a brush, and we're going to just squeegee the decal. Make sure it's lying nice and flat. Okay, lovely. So that's the main decal on. We do have some more decals that go around some of these hinges, so let's have a look at that. Okay, I've got the other decals out that we're going to need. They all seem fairly simple to put on, and they're in the order that they're going on. So hinge, we have something that goes in there, another hinge. I think it's the bracket that keeps this attached actually, and then we've got an opening here for that last one. So just going to pop first couple in, put them at different ends of the water so I know what's what. And we'll just put these on so you can see, and then I'll do the underside of this, do the other top wing, and then I'll come back to you when we do the bottom wing is the plan, I think. Okay, let's get this show on the road. first decal goes round just the bottom end of that bracket there. Second one on. Just needs a moment more, I think. Ready. Last one around these hinges at the end there. There we go. And then finally this one. Which goes that way like that. Is that right? No, I think it's the other way. Okay, that is the decals on the upper wing. So I've got those to put on underneath. It's the same process. Okay, I have worked out what these dotted lines are for. So when we put the decal on, I mentioned the fact that we've got this bit at the bottom that actually should fold under. So this dotted line is the edge of the wing. So as I've already fitted my parts, what I can do is I can use the dotted line to trim the decal before we actually take it off the paper and put it on the part, which will make life a bit easier than having to trim it afterwards. So if you line the rule up with the dotted line, there we go, and that decal should now be a perfect fit. which will make it a lot easier to line up when we come to add it on. So that's what the dotted lines are for. It doesn't tell you that in the instructions. You have to work it out, and it'll dawn on some of us sooner than it did me, possibly. Okay, the underside of the wing is very similar to the upper side. This is the other wing actually, but the decal's slightly different, so I just wanted to show you there's a couple of differences. So I'm going to do the same thing again and just put a little bit of water down to help me maneuver the decal, and we're going to line up with that hole. There we go. A lot easier having trimmed it, as I just said. So let's just have a look. Just set that angle correctly. That all looks good. There we go, that's the main decal on, nice and easy. So let's get these ones in the soak. Okay, so pretty much the same as before. We're putting these little brown decals around the bottom of the hinges. There's actually one decal less on this side. So I'm going to just quickly put these on, and then we can put microsol on with all of them at the same time, I think. And then this last one is different to the one on the upper side of the wing, as it's just a simple box, not two boxes within each other. There we go. Okay, that is the underside of the upper wing done now. So you've now seen upper and underside. So I'm going to finish doing this original decal that we put on before we realised we needed to trim it is now dried enough for me to take this off. So yeah, just cutting through it. Very sharp blade. Right, now the question is, how do we get that decal off? And the answer is we just lift it off. There we go. So I hadn't let the decal fully dry, quite clearly, and what we'd done is not put microsol on it, so it wasn't adhering, it was just with the water. So that bought me a little bit of time. There we go. Now I'm just putting a bit more microsol on the edge so that it conforms to, inevitably there's be a little bit of a curve there where the part goes round, so that will just make sure that that works okay. There you go. So that's the upper wing corrected. Okay, there is a further 16 decals we need to put on the tail area around these hinges, and they're exactly the same on both sides. So I'm going to show you the underside, and then we'll just crack on and get them done and move on to the next stage on the lower wing. Right, so these decals that go over the hinges are going across the join, so we will have to go back and cut through them and reset them once they're dry, just so that they look correct. Otherwise, as you can see, the decal will just sit across the top and that doesn't look right at all. So we'll get them on and then we'll go around and microsole them all at the same time, because they're only small. There we go, decal number 8, last one on this side. Okay, we can just go and touch them with some microsole just to make sure they set nice and flat. Right, there we go, we'll let that dry and then we'll flip it over and do the other side, but I'll do that off camera. Right, my next task ahead of priming is to get all this prepped. I've got some little bits of filling to do, and just getting things ready for paint, and then we need to fill all this lot with some sponge and stuff and get it all ready for paint, because the way they do the lips means that we need to put the glazing in after paint. So lots to think about. I have some sink marks there. My thought process is to wait and see what it looks like under prime before I make a final decision on that. But yeah, so a little bit of tidy up to do, so let's crack on with that. do have to do a little bit of reshaping around here where this is going to be leather, and it doesn't quite line up, and there's a bit of a gap between the two moulded parts, so I just need to do a little bit of reshaping here. So the best filler for that sort of work is Milliput. I like to use one that's very visible. It comes in different colours if you've not used it before. White, I think they do black now. A sort of green colour, pale green colour is the original one, as I remember. And then this one is like a terracotta colour. So it's a two-part. So we've got putty and we've got a hardener. And I've had this for a while, as you can see. So I'll get rid of that little bit. And you're really mixing about the same amount of each. So I only need a tiny amount. And what you've got to do is just warm the two bits up, get them all mixed together nice and evenly, and then you can sculpt it using water. So I like to use an old number 11 blade, and what we're going to do is we're going to get some hardener out that looks like it's okay to use. There we go. That will be plenty. Just give it a little warm up between your fingers. Okay. Now we need about the same amount of putty. Yeah, it's about right. There you go, you can see the colour's starting to change now, which means that it's starting to get mixed together. Okay, that is now one uniform colour. Take that little hard bit out. So that is ready to go. And this dries rock hard. You can scrape it, you can sand it, but it is really, really hard. It will be harder than the plastic. So it's important that what we do is sculpt it as much as we possibly can before it dries. So we can get rid of those bits. I'm going to cut it into 4 pieces. That's very much the backup. And then these 2 pieces is what we're going to use for filling what we need to do. I'm actually going to cut those into 2 again, because we actually don't need that much. Right. So that's ready to go. I'm going to wash my hands. and then we can get cracking. Right, okay. So the secret to using this stuff is it's quite sticky, and the secret is to put small amounts in and then build it up. So I'm going to put some in, push it down into the gap so that we know we've actually filled the gap and we're not just on the surface. There we go. And then just dipping the blade into a bit of water, and we can now sculpt that into shape. And all we're doing is pushing it into the gap and then using the blade to level it across the two plastic parts. Keep unloading the blade so we're nice and clean. Okay, so we've got that filled at the top, needs a little bit more on the side, so we're going to go back, and this time rather than pressing it in and scraping it back off, this time we're pressing it in and we just keep pressing it gently, taking away bits so that we can build it up. So we're just putting a layer on top of what we just did. I don't know if you can see that now. You can see how that sort of blends in, and then we'll be able to gently sand that once it's dry. I try not to have it proud, I try to actually shape it and finish the job while it's soft. Right, I'll do the other side and then I'll come back to you when probably we're ready for masking it all off. Before we can do any painting, we need to protect all this beautiful work we've done so far. So we need to get all this masked off, so let's do that first. A trick with sponge is to make sure that you've got it in covering everything and no paint can get through the sides, but also that it's not blocking you from actually doing your painting. So just tucking it in. There we go. I think that is okay. There we go. Now I've got a little edge there that might let a little bit of spray in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small bit of sponge and just push that in on top, and that should hopefully solve that problem a little bit. There we go. Right, I'm happy with that, but just belt and braces. We'll put a little bit of tape along the top.